Hey, welcome to episode 146 of the Titanforge podcast. I am Dratnos, joined by Kettles.
Yo, what's up? Yo, what's
What
up?
up?
We're back again.
Once again, and Trell.
Good evening.
Good evening
morning.
to you as well, or morning, or wherever.
Or if they're watching it on YouTube, of course, or listening to it on Spotify, it could be morning.
Yep, hope all of our commuters are having a nice commute. Stay focused, watch the road. And yeah. So this week we've got Mythic Plus focus show. We're going to talk a little bit about the direction of Mythic Plus and Dragonflight, affixes. I guess this is going to be sort of a half wish list / half discussion of the trajectory that we're kind of expecting it to go, and then how we would like it to go, and where those things differ. And then we'll also potentially talk about the Dinars and how that system's been going if we have time. There's a chance that we will talk about Mythic Plus for an hour, like we often do whenever we're just hanging out.
We've never done that.
Yeah, so if that happens, we'll maybe cut the Dinar thing into the future at some point, but that is the current plan.
But yeah, I mean, a lot of this is off of the back of that beta is live now. The Dragonflight has moved over from alpha to beta, so go and check the launcher. You may actually have access to the beta. If you scroll up to the in development section, it'll just be like Dragonflight beta. So go and check that. But yeah, basically what we're going over is some things that we would like to see, maybe with Mythic Plus moving forward, and hopefully we have time for the Dinar system, because I think that brings like a lot of very interesting discussion.
Now, it is worth noting as well, we have some esports stuff coming up over the next few weekends. The Great Push Finals are beginning at the same time that this YouTube video basically comes out, or the podcast, but for those of you watching live, it'll be in about a day. And the teams are looking rather stacked. So we got 2 teams from the Chinese region, including the top team here, which includes several of the people who won the last Great Push. You got Anuo, a bunch of people from Aster, and then a Skyline player as well, right, Tettles?
Yeah, so ZyBB, Annie, Anuo, and then it's two new members of that team.
And then the second seeded team out of this region, what's the lore behind them?
Just a live key pushing team that have been top of the score leaderboard for a while, decided that they wanted to dip their toes into the TGP scene. They ended up usurping the third place team, which was like a full Skyline raid, full Skyline team. So
Wait, they did 31 docks?
That team is supposedly very good. The second place team, but obviously the former Aster Y team still the overwhelming favorites.
Out of the region, at least, right? Like the
Yes.
favorites in the TGP itself, probably in the finals. I mean, I feel like you could make an argument for the first seeded Chinese team. Obviously, they are the defending champions in TGP. Arguing against Echo is always a hard thing to do in an M+ competition. And then Monka actually kind of banged in that region too. I think there's a good argument to be made that they might have the highest chance of winning this thing as well.
Yeah, Monka was looking so good. I was watching most of that, and they were ahead or with Echo until the very end.
They were leading for 13 of the 15 hours, I think, something like that.
Yeah, then at the end they lost to Echo by about 5 minutes of dungeon time on that tiebreaker, but they got to 193 points first. Depending on how the finals look, they absolutely could be as strong or stronger as a team. And then you've got the plucky American upstarts, the region everybody's counting out, with Ambition and Donuts and Despair, that a lot of people clowning on our region as Americans, saying, none of us would have made it to day 2 in the European region or whatever, but I dispute that. I think Ambition and Donuts are also world-class teams, and in there with a shot too.
Yeah, that was mentioned on broadcast, but the America region was given some much harder to 2-chest and 3-chest dungeons overall. And I think that was a big factor. Although I would say the average skill level of EU versus the American regions was a little bit higher.
I agree
Just not
with that.
as skewed as it ended up being.
The top 2 from the NA region are also very, very good. Ambition and Donuts and Despair. I mean, these are 2 teams with like lots of players that we've seen in MDIs and TGPs before. I do think that like if I'm giving like elimination results, I think the second seed in China is going out day 1. And then if I have to make a second elimination result, I do think it's maybe Donuts and Despair. going out day 2. But this is because like this is the closest top 6 that I think we've ever seen. Just with like the quality of these teams. These are some crazy good teams. And
it's going to be close. I think day 1 is going to be like neck and neck for the bottom 3 spots maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like depending on which dungeons they get and whether there's ones that are like right on that 2-3 chest line or 1-2 chest line. All of that stuff could be really important as well.
You know what's funny? I really wonder if how the Aster team is going to do. So they lost Yulo and they lost Qingshen, who so Yulo was their main shot caller and Qingshen was like the mage player who was like known to be the best mage in the world. That guy was crazy good. I wonder like how that's going to affect them because they almost ended up winning TGP1 if you remember. If their Mista Tyrna Scythe goes a little bit different and they're not stuck in there for 2 hours trying to do like one and not get one dragon route and mists, and they probably win TGP1 as well.
Yeah, there was also a little bit of Plague Borer shenanigans that happened in that PvP as well.
Yeah. I really wonder how this Chinese team is going to do though.
Yeah, I'm also excited to see how this all turns out. I think I agree with you that the second seeded teams from the Chinese and American regions are the ones that are likely to be going home on days 1 and 2, but I do think it's not a sure thing by any stretch.
Want to do winner predictions real quick?
Sure. I'm going to predict Echo.
Trell?
Echo, but it's like a 50-50.
I'll go with Monka then.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I like the Monka pick. I don't think that, like, I actually don't know whether Echo or Monka is a better pick.
I picked them from MDI. I picked them for MDI, and I picked this for the most recent regional weekend. Surely they will come through for me one time.
Assuredly, there's no way they'll lose 3 tournaments in a row that they're against Echo in. Yeah,
I mean it's got to be so nerve-wracking to like be leading against Echo like for the first time in years as a team for the first time in years that any team has been leading on them, and then maintain that lead for 15 hours of gameplay straight. That is quite the challenge.
Beat them in the upper finals in the MDI, then lost the grands too.
Dude,
they're right there.
It's got to be horrifying though. You imagine it's like, you know, they're there doing their practice and the phone rings and it's like, yeah, what is it? Sir, we have bad news. Tettles has picked you as the winner of the upcoming weekend. No. All right, we also have some upcoming other events that have just been announced. Zymox's Charity Cash and the Solo Shuffle Showdown. The Zymox's Charity Cash one's pretty cool. This one is Echo versus Liquid. In Castle Nathria and Sepulchre are the first ones. In a raid race with extra twists, extra faded powers. All bosses will have at least 2 faded powers. At least 2 faded powers. And then as they reach checkpoints in the raids and I guess kill the last boss, they'll get extra donated to their charity over the other team's charity. So, and then the guild that's in the lead gets some kind of curse as well at the checkpoint. So, seems kind of cool. I obviously I like the idea of like a charity event. I think those are always cool. I especially like the idea of a Blizzard sanctioned raid event of some kind because it's been a long time since the raid races of BlizzCon's past. You know, those stopped back in like MoP, right? So seeing something
at least before Legion, because I never saw any.
The last one was Siege of Orgrimmar.
Okay, yeah, seeing something in this space is really exciting because raids are sweet and Blizzard sponsored esports are sweet, and the idea of those two merging, not necessarily for like Race to World First, but for events between Race to World First, I think is really cool.
Do you think Race to World First kind of killed this raid race, like the desire for this kind of thing? Because I think the biggest thing with like the raid races of old, it was kind of nice to see what the teams would look like or whatever whenever they're racing one another outside of like just refreshing F5ing my WoW prog page. Do you think that the Race to World First though, being so world broadcast, kind of killed any appetite for this style of an event?
I don't think so. I think that there's still like I think that it would be sweet in future BlizzCons if there was raid races again as well. Like I think those are cool. Obviously, like I think the Race to World First is the best, and maybe it kills some excitement of these sorts of things. But I don't know. I think if anything, it gets more eyes on like who are Echo, who are Liquid. Way more people know who Echo and Liquid are now than know who like Blood Legion and Midwinter and Paragon were back when those guilds were doing the raid races at BlizzCon, I would say.
This is a good point.
So yeah, I don't know. It's hype.
There was a Sanctum Echo versus Liquid raid race.
Yeah, that was just put on by the two orgs themselves.
That one actually got decent viewership, so I actually do maybe think that there's a little bit more appetite for this kind of thing. I hope it does well. I really like stuff like this.
It's cool that they're doing so many new events. Like we had the variety show, we got this event. There's another one announced, right, as well?
Yeah, the Solo Shuffle Showdown, which we also know that ranked solo queue is coming to Dragonflight. But this is cool for PvPers, yeah, because I think that this is so it's like 36 players from both NA and EU will just do solo shuffle matches, and it'll kind of be like TFT lobbies, right, where like the winners stick around and the losers get eliminated, and they merge down into smaller and smaller lobbies. And this one doesn't have that charity angle, but it does have an $100,000 prize pool, which is kind of lit for the first solo shuffle esports thing. Yeah,
that's half the TGP prize pool.
Maybe time to pick up the old player versus player queue, get into some arenas.
This year for PvE we had MDI and TGP.
Yeah.
And so they have AWC and now the solo shuffle, and then also on top of that, we have the raid race, which obviously some of it's going to charity. Well, all of it's going to charity, I guess.
Yeah.
How did people get invited to the solo shuffle tournament? Is it just like the top rated PvPers, or?
It's an invitational tournament where the players will be selected from a mix of AWC competitors, PvP ladders, and members of the PvP community. So,
well, I played Bear that one time.
Maybe some of our favorite tweeters that from the PvP community will be able to show up in this event as well, because there's a lot of tweets I see from PvPers that are accursed and spread all over my Twitter timeline. So
name them right now.
At Rev, at Dillo.
One of them is a ladder. Okay, both of those people are ladder players. They get high ranked on the ladder. There's a third that maybe not so much.
But yeah, either way, that should be sweet. I hope what they do is they put them in voice comms with each other, and we actually get to hear the voice comms of the solo shuffle teams, like as these players like are just thrown in with each other for the first time or whatever.
Well, I think that the biggest thing with solo shuffle is that you're not supposed to be comms, yeah?
Ah, really? Okay, well,
it's supposed to be solo queue, yeah? Kinda.
Fair enough, yeah. Or you could use Blizzard in-game voice. Maybe that would automatically put you with your arena team. Huh?
Blizzard in-game voice is not that bad as much as it gets clowned on.
Dude, I remember.
I don't even know why we use Discord anymore. We might as well just use Discord. Blizzard in-game voice and then communities for like recording text messages and all that.
If Blizzard in-game voice and communities came out in 2010, it would probably be the most popular thing for the WoW space. But they didn't.
I remember one time in like a Siege of Borealis where Discord went down and we all were like trying to get in Blizzard in-game voice to keep going.
Yep, it happens.
All right, cool. So let's move on to the main topic, which is Mythic Plus, the direction of Mythic Plus, and how it's looking in Dragonflight and how we're hoping it'll look, because there's been a lot. I would say the Season 4 is the most different season from a previous M Plus season that we've seen in a lot of changes kind of slowly happened from Legion to now, and I would say the difference between Season 3 and Season 4 is one of the biggest kind of philosophical shifts, maybe not intentional, just based on what the dungeon pool is. And we figured it would be good to talk about these sorts of things as we go into a new expansion where they get to make some of these choices maybe intentionally. Because I think one of the biggest things is in Season 4 dungeons, the timer itself is not at issue in most of these dungeons, right? Like most Season 4 dungeons, maybe Iron Docks is an exception.
That's the only one.
It's like, hey, this timer is like, if you don't wipe and you're not like super snail moding it, like if you kill each boss, you in one pull, you get through the dungeon and you upgrade your keystone, right? And you win or lose based on whether or not that's true. And obviously, like the bosses are maybe harder than a lot of the average Shadowlands bosses, maybe numerically, or maybe they have like weirder mechanics. But
I think so.
I would say so. Yeah,
it's a very different thing.
From Season 3 to Season 4, sorry, the bosses are a lot harder. I think from Season 1, to season 4, they'd be more comparable because each boss was nerfed a million times since then.
I worry that like the nerf progression over the course of the expansion, from like how Shadowlands was maybe too much in some areas. Now that like I've seen how season 4 ended up feeling like maybe they were too heavy-handed with some of the nerfs to bosses. Not to Hakar though. Fuck that boss.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because like if the bosses stop being hard, invariably you get to the DPS check across all 40 minutes of the dungeon as the difficulty, right? Rather than the difficulty being, can we defeat this boss? And like, can we survive the medium-sized trash pulls that are just like the only size that makes sense in these dungeons?
I think that Streets and Gambit actually feel like they fit kind of well with the rest of the season though, in a strange way. Just like how the bosses and like the rest of the trash feel, it feels like it actually kind of flows well with the remainder of the dungeons. Obviously, there are some things that are more modern. I think the biggest issue with the WoD dungeons in particular, telegraphing of mechanics is atrocious in the WoD dungeons. It is so bad in Iron Docks in particular. I think Grimrail is a little bit better about this, but like even still, the Thunder Zones in Grimrail cringe. Iron Docks, half the mobs there don't even telegraph the mechanics that they're doing.
Yeah, there's a lot of AoE around the mob kind of mechanics, like the blade storms and the
Stomp or
slash
whatever.
mechanic.
There's no wind up.
Yeah. There's no wind up and there's no indicator, so you just have to like see the timer on some weak aura and move out of melee as a melee player. That's also not the greatest thing, I'd say.
I love the grease files.
Those you can at least see if they're carrying the grease files from the debuff that they have.
Thank God.
Yeah.
True.
That was what I was hoping to know. I also love the first boss where he just it's clear how he's charging after you know how it is. I know how it works, but it does not telegraph very well. It's just telegraphing these old dungeons mechanically is really rough. That's my biggest issue with the old dungeons. To be fair,
I feel like that is like a WoD dungeons thing in particular as well. Like when I'm thinking about like I feel like Karazhan is kind of the emblematic difference between the Shadowlands dungeons and the Season 4 dungeons, right? Where Karazhan is really like, this timer, if you have 0 deaths, is doable on any key level, right? It's never the problem. It's literally just, have you avoided wiping? In lower Karazhan, it's like, have you avoided wiping 2 or more times or 3 or more times? And if the answer to that is yes, you're good, right? I don't know, though. Something about, like, timer pressure? I have enjoyed seasons where there has been like timer pressure as well, where it's like we're going through and we're like, it matters that we're doing good damage, right? It matters that we're pulling, like coming up with a faster pull, coming up with a pull that's like 20% bigger or slightly better routing is like valuable. Whereas this season it's like, oh, actually the best way to guarantee your upper or your lower Karazhan route is like, let's get all these shrouded buffs, right? Like let's set up our lust timings because we've got like 7 minutes that we're just going to AFK waiting for lust or whatever. And it's like, I don't know. It's weird.
So like the major difference is like upper Karazhan is, can I kill the bosses at all? And then like the newer dungeons, we'll just use mists because I feel like that's a good example. It's like, do I have the DPS to do this dungeon as a whole in time?
Yeah,
that's true. I think like the only really hard part for high keys and mists was the first boss, and like everything after that is just how efficient you can damage the mobs as you go through, what cheese you can do to pull mobs faster through the maze and all that. And that's like just against the timer. I do like the balance that this season has of like Iron Docks is a tight timer, but there's some dungeons that have like a pretty lenient timer, and then there's 2 that have a really lenient timer. I think that's actually pretty good for the game because you can kind of like warm up with the easier timers as a learning group, and then you can move into the harder timer at the end of the session or something, you know. But also I think that the survival checks are good, which I'm sure we'll talk more about, but Mana Worm in particular is a bad example of that because it basically requires a blood decay. Even if blood decay wasn't this OP, it would still almost require a blood decay for the way the boss is designed. Yeah, I mean, Prop Paladin can't heal every tick from holding on to 10 orbs though. That's the problem.
That's true. But okay, Trill, I have a question. How do you feel about like Curator style DPS checks?
I think Curator is actually a really, really well designed boss, except for the fact that you can't have anyone in melee range of the orbs this season. The way they designed it, they only jump to the tank, And so if someone's trying to melee them on top of the tank and there's more than one up, which there kind of has to be at high levels, then the melee player is just going to die. Otherwise, I really like the way it's designed, and you have to like hold some burn damage for each damage imp, and it gets harder and harder.
Yeah, Curator. I think I like it. I would agree. It would be nice if it wasn't like as melee unfriendly as it is, but yeah. Let's talk about the defensive, like the EHP checks, those sorts of things. So Mana Devours being example, is it just the Blood Decay thing you don't like about it, or is it the way that it just kind of like zaps everybody on a timer that you got a weak aura versus the way that some of the other bosses' survivability works?
I think that its AoE ability, the discharge thing, that like one shots at a high level is fine because it's a long enough CD for classes to rotate defensives on. Like I'm pretty sure every single class can basically pop something for every AoE tick in this day and age because we have a lot of defensives at this point. But the way the boss works for the tank player, like no other tank class can survive that boss at a certain level. Like Blood Decay can go up to the very highest ceiling, and then the next tank could probably do like -3 levels of the key. I think that's just poor design in that one mechanic of the boss.
Okay, so I have some EHP checks listed out because in a lot of the Shadowlands dungeons, we actually didn't have too many of these EHP checks, and whenever I say that, like I'm talking about having to rotate defensives really well to make sure that you're able to survive. So Hillbrand has the Purifying Burst. Medivh has like the Burrs and the Flame Wreath, which I would say that's a little bit less like the rest of these because they're not like conventional one-shots, but I would still say like a playing to survive kind of thing. Then you also have Curator, and then there's a Grimrail first and final bosses, and then the Money Order from the Postmaster. Those are all EHP checks that we have this season. But then, like to counterbalance that, all of these dungeons, their timers are lenient, so you're afforded the opportunity to play for more survivability, whether that be like cheat death trinkets, I think have been fairly popular, at least on like survival hunters. Beyond that, it's not like but sometimes you end up having to take like versatility bounties or swap to versatility to stamina flasks as well, or go versatility on your Celias. These are the kind of decisions that you have to make in a lot of these dungeons, though, to make sure that you're not getting 100 to 0.
One gripe about that, and I think all those are the perfect examples of the effective HP checks. But I think that having gear swapping would be awesome for that kind of meta in the dungeons, because then you could actually swap to like a super verse heavy set for that boss, or a tank trinket, or a cheat death trinket, or a shield emitter from Legion. Like literally anything like that for just that one boss. And maybe that's a hot take for me, but that's how I liked it when the previous time this was the meta in Legion, where every key had a huge EHP check.
Yeah, I still worry about like if gear swapping was unrestricted, there being some like the play pattern being pretty, like okay, swapping to AoE set, swapping to my big AoE set for this big AoE pull, swapping to my next on use trinket that's not on cooldown now for this next pull, and like I feel like the fully optimizing of unrestricted gear swapping is still something I would be very cautious about. But if there was a way to like have somewhat restricted gear swapping, like one swap per dungeon, or like something that you could use to let the whole group swap, but it takes 30 seconds off your timer to use it or something, and then you could do that before like a boss fight that you really needed something for, I think I could maybe get behind something like that, but I'm still not sure that's better than just the current, like, because you can kind of do that right now by like hearthing out and getting summoned back or whatever.
Yeah, I mean the only thing I really even care about normally is like swapping trinkets, but I feel like your swapping in dungeons is maybe less. It shouldn't necessarily be a thing. I actually don't mind the swapping Celia stats or like changing to a stamina flask in dungeons. I mean, these are only issues that happen on like super high keys even. So I think that I think that we're definitely in the minority here with that specifically.
I agree. But I actually think a lot of people would not benefit very much from having gear sets swapping available to them. I think they don't like it, but I wish there was some option to like carry the more squishy classes through those kinds of bosses in these situations like there used to be last time this was meta.
I will say though that I do actually like that I like that these EHP checks exist in a majority of the dungeons, or at least half the dungeons this season. It feels really nice to Okay, it feels really bad that we don't have a website to calculate our health and whether or not I'm about to get one shot. However, it does also feel nice to like have to play around that a little bit more.
Yeah, I miss I did like I think the thing in Legion as well, it was like, oh, if you were a clever squishy class person, you could make like a gear set to let you live the thing that the warlocks live for free, right?
Exactly.
But I do kind of worry that like if we just got back to that again, we would just go to an even higher level where the warlocks would need that set and the other classes wouldn't live even with that set. And it would be like just metagame. The metagame being better would still have the chilling effect on the squishier classes.
Before we get too far, how do you guys feel about tertiaries, specifically avoidance?
It's almost required. I mean, it is required in super high keys, especially this season and last season. Usually the late seasons of each expansion kind of show that, but I wish it was more reliably available, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the fact that there's like 40 BOEs you can buy for each class in the Fated season, right? And so it's just like a BOE avoidance simulator or a +2 farming simulator for avoidance hunting. I think both of those are not great ways to get it.
I am logged in right now. I have 18% avoidance.
Whew. That's not even that much compared
awesome.
to what some people have, right? Like, yeah.
Some people literally have over 25%. Like, holy
18 is a lot, though, yeah.
Yeah, 18 is
Honestly,
a lot, but I don't run much versatility.
I wish they would just take avoidance out of the game, to be honest, because a lot of times it's just RNG or gold this season if you can get a bunch of avoidance or leech. Like, leech isn't a huge deal compared to avoidance and keys, but like as a tank player, I usually accumulate 10 to 12% leech over a season. Whereas last season, I don't think I didn't get a single leech drop the entire season somehow. It was like the most unlucky thing ever.
Yeah, luckily it doesn't matter too much for the old blood DK, but for brew, that stat is really good for brew.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Do we want to talk a little bit about these other bosses titles you've listed here, like Medivh?
No, I think we're good
right.
on them.
Let's talk a little bit about the seasonal affixes. How seasonal affixes have gone. In particular, I would say I feel like I've been quite liking Shrouded. I feel like Encrypted was real good, so we're kind of on 2 good affixes in a row, which has never happened in Warcraft's history before, right? Like it was there's always been a bad one at least every 2 affixes. So that's pretty encouraging. The other encouraging thing, I feel like Shrouded and Encrypted, people's like the main complaints I hear about Shrouded are just like, oh, this is boring, it's too simple, it's easy like that. But I kind of feel like if we're going to go into Dragonflight where they've said, season 1 is going to have a completely different set of dungeons than season 2, I kind of feel like seasonal affixes will need to be not super complicated to make that work, right?
I hate the term boring because I don't even think they're boring. I think they're just simple. I think it's totally fine.
Yeah, I mean, it's just I think that the sorts of people that like really liked Prideful, for instance, where it was like, I'm doing these +15 keys. The bosses aren't actually that hard. My gear is quite a bit better than this dungeon. But the way that Prideful works is like, this is actually still hard enough that this is hard for me when it procs, right? Like this is actually an affix I have to care about.
Can I introduce them to Zul'Gumux?
Right, Zul'Gumux is kind of like that. It kind of is, yeah.
Sure.
But I feel like there is and I feel like Blizzard has kind of aimed some of the affixes at this crowd of like people that are doing keys that they're over geared for, and you make the affix actually like the hardest part of the dungeon and the part of the dungeon that's like the most memorable. And I feel like that scales really poorly into the high keys, but it's something that maybe makes the affix more memorable and more fun for 15 farmers or people that do a weekly 15 every week. So I don't know exactly, because for me, yeah, Shrouded and Encrypted in particular is like such a banger affix. I would love to just see that one every other season or something like that. That one is just, I'd never be sad to see an affix like that.
I really like the placement of the Shrouded mobs. I feel like the Shrouded mobs placement, just in general, has been like really solid, and especially like the random mobs that got placed in like streets,
yeah,
and, like,
shady
Grim Realm,
dealers,
stuff like that.
That's how you can tell Shrouded like this was a labor of love. This was not like people accuse it of being like, oh, a phoned in affix, but when you look at the way that these mobs have been mapped in each of the dungeons and like where those shady dealers are, and like it is clear that there was a lot of intention of like this being a cool thing to figure out.
They didn't give count on the PTR. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And like this is something that you and I discussed a little bit offline. We were talking about it. We were like, I don't love how they don't give count, but at the same point, it does make sense because you were getting so much stats off them. Now the fact that they do give count, I think it is so cool. It makes routing decisions super nice too, because you end up pulling these one-off shady dealers. Like there's that one in Iron Docks that if you mess up your count on accident, you can just grab that one on the boat.
Yeah.
True. I think the end result of the affix is really good, and the fact that they give count does solve a lot of problems. Plus, the mobs they chose to replace with Dreadlords, like Dranos mentioned, are like the perfect mobs. Like a lot of times with the casters that you want to get rid of in any given pulls, you can actually double pull instead of being limited to just one pack. It's a very nice selection of mobs they chose. That guy must be a tank player.
Instead of giving us a Grimrail Depot where there's a double technician, they instead made one of the technicians an infiltrator. Thank God.
Exactly.
Or the third Farseer on the last platform of the Grimrail Depot. One of those Farseers is in fact an infiltrator. Again, thank God.
Oh, triple Farseer. That'd be awful, actually.
Yeah, it would have been bad.
Yeah. So I guess for seasonal affixes, I'm kind of happy with the trajectory right now. I kind of wouldn't mind if they like brought back Awakened or Encrypted for a Dragonflight season if they don't want to keep like coming up with new ones, because like I feel like just putting those into some Dragonflight dungeons would be sweet enough. Like I worry that would have some of the season 4 like recycled content grumbling from people, but like honestly, like if I got to experience every expansion, an Awakened season and an Encrypted season, I would be pretty happy, because both of those are really sweet affixes and I love what they do to dungeons.
I agree. I like that.
How about the non-seasonal affixes, though? I imagine that this is where our feedback will get a little bit more mixed, because historically, at least, we've generally been in favor of affixes, the level 4 and the level 7 ones being less impactful than they are. Over the course of Shadowlands, most affixes have either already been fine or have been changed to be less impactful, right? Like Necrotic has gotten reduced down to 5 seconds. Bursting this expansion has went to the flat amount rather than the % health amount.
Bolstering duration.
Bolstering got oh my god, the bolstering not affecting bosses, bolstering getting duration. Like both of those are, I would say bolstering is pretty close to fixed. I mean, it's still like,
well,
it's still an affix I don't like to see on my feed, but
it's still a time loss no matter what, right? Because there's always going to be mobs with differing health pools linked together in pulls, and a lot of times there's more than one of each type of mobs, so you can't just CC the small mobs and et cetera, et cetera.
I just worry that affixes in general, and this is like an opinion that I've come to after seeing how Grimrail is played out. Affixes just end up impacting dungeon design way too much, because like this is another iteration. So Grimrail with basically any of the on-death affixes, Spiteful, like honestly Storming's pretty obnoxious in there too, Sanguine, Quaking, yeah, it's like all of those are so obnoxious in Grimrail. But then if you start to think about it, Inspiring in Spires of Ascension, Halls of Atonement, turbo annoying. Bolstering in dungeons before, like sweeping changes to what did and did not bolster mobs was also really obnoxious. And then like Quaking on mechanics that force you to stack up like Money Order, that kind of stuff, or like 3 of the bosses in Theater of Pain with Quaking, or like Sanguine in Waycrest Manor, or Sanguine in
Toldegor.
Shrine of the Storm, or Sanguine in Toldegor. I feel like it just impacts the dungeon design too much.
Even bosses like Shade of Medivh, right? It's like, oh, Storming Shade of Medivh.
Yeah.
Oh, Volcanic Shade of Medivh even is like, ooh.
Okay, so like in isolation, are these that bad? Like, are the dungeons that bad? Or the affix interactions making this dungeon so much less fun to play? And
I think it's the latter, yeah. I think Grimrail is a perfect example, like you said, where it's actually a pretty good dungeon until you add 1 or 2 of these crazy affixes that affect it in a bad way. And then it turns into this like, oh, there's actually just no space for anything, and some things feel very unfair. And I think that's what a lot of people would like to see go, at least maybe 1 less affix in that situation, so then it's just only slightly unfair. I don't know.
Now, I have some issues with Grimrail. I think it gets amplified a lot further whenever you'd have to factor in affixes.
So Trell, for reference, earlier this week, Tettles did a Sanguine, Storming, Quaking, Spiteful, Grimrail Depot.
Just for the memes?
For
or
a
what?
GG WoW video, we made 2 teams do those against each other. Yeah.
But like,
That does not sound fun.
it just ends up limiting like dungeon design too, because think about Spires of Ascension as well. And Spires of Ascension was really bad on Sanguine, and it was really bad on Bolstering. And it was bad on both those affixes because a lot of the times there were mobs that had just like
Squad leaders,
50%.
right?
Yeah, they had lieutenant mobs in the middle of packs, which was fine. Like, it's fine to have that many lieutenant mobs. It just becomes a problem on specific affixes, especially too whenever like the Goliath, which casts the Rebellious Fist, wouldn't move sometimes because it had a shield mechanic on it. Which, again, is this an issue of the Goliath, or is this an issue of Sanguine? Like, it's an issue of Sanguine, right? Like, I don't feel like you could say it's an issue of the Goliath shouldn't have this recharge phase. But at the end of the day, I feel like the easiest thing to do is like, we've had these affixes since Legion. Most of these affixes were involved in the initial iteration of like Mythic Plus affixes, and I think it's time to retire some of them.
I agree with that. I would love to see at least a couple of them go, like Sanguine, Bolstering, Necrotic. Like, those are probably the biggest offenders of people playing them for years and just being tired of them. And I think that it would do a lot of good for the new dungeons too, for people to just have to learn the dungeons and not the same set of affixes for the 7th time on the new dungeons.
I just think that like we should have less. Just I think like 1 row less, and just like Fortified and Tyrannical can probably stay.
So you're saying like like Fortified or Tyrannical, and then one other affix, and then the seasonal, and it's just like it is
that's what I
Sanguine
would
week,
want to,
or I
yeah.
guess it is Storming week. Would you be in favor of those affixes being like increased in intensity to make up for being the only one on the row, or just like current Storming or current Spiteful as just the affix that's active?
I think the goal is to have affixes affect the key less. So I would say just keep them as is or less impactful on the key, and just make it more of a focus on the seasonal mechanic, if anything. If you want to like add pressure to any affix, at least make it the seasonal.
I will say, even if they don't do this, I think one thing they should be much more aggressive about is looking at certain interactions like squad leaders and Spires of Ascension and being like, let's just hard code this thing to not get bolstered, right? Like, if you literally just made squad leaders not receive bolstering stacks,
okay.
I guess squad leaders didn't get bolstered, right? Because they had the AoE damage reduction on them. They died first, but like, if it was like Kyrian Goliaths don't heal from Sanguine or something like that, it's like, well, it was very skill testing, right? Like, not Sanguine healing a Kyrian Goliath was a skill test, sure, but it wasn't a fun skill test.
It wasn't. Yeah, that's the
Right?
thing. Is like, sure, it was difficult, but then it just like removed fun from it for no reason. It's like, okay, yeah, so that's fine.
So yeah, maybe a mid-ground solution would be kind of going through the dungeons with more of a scalpel and like hard coding certain mobs to not have the disaster cases at least be as disastrous. Like, what if Kyrian Goliath just got 20% of the healing from Sanguine that other mobs do, or something like that, and that way it's like, nerfed, right? Like some sort of done mob by mob thing that you on a case by case basis. I feel like obviously that's like a lot more work and introduces a lot more code to be spaghettified, but if they didn't want to lob an affix from the rotation, I feel like that would be something that would have gone a long way in Spires in particular.
Same thing with like Necrotic too. Like, they should go ahead and just like look at the attack speed of mobs, like how many mobs are going to be in the pool most likely, and then at least vary it so that when you walk into the first pull of Necrotic Wake, for example, you don't instantly get 45 stacks of Necrotic in 3 seconds, which is just unreasonable, or I think they've done a good job of inspiring, usually putting the right mob to be the inspired mob in each pack. Sometimes there's like a really bad example of that. But then there's also the quaking situations where groups will have a death on some quaking timer interaction in the key. Like the last boss of Iron Docks, every group had a death to quaking that first week. Well, and I think they could avoid that by just looking at boss mechanics.
Money Order, Theater of Pain, 3 bosses in Theater of Pain. Like, I don't know. It's not just that Iron Docks one, right? Even though that one's the most recent. Right.
Yeah. I think I like the idea of condensing the affixes so that it's like there's Tyrannical and Fortified, and then there's like the Evergreen affixes, and then there's the seasonal affix, and the Evergreen affix, like one of the Evergreen affixes is in each time. And I think that would give them a little bit of room to do some sprucing up of the evergreen affixes. You could put reaping into that rotation, perhaps. It could be something that is of the level of complexity to go in there. You could take something like volcanic and like mix it with another affix as well. Like volcanic and explosive could be combined into one affix of somehow.
Ooh,
or
what if every time you got hit by a storming tornado, it volcanicked another player? In the
yeah,
party
exactly.
at the same
Something
time?
cool like that. Or yeah, I don't know. Some like if they wanted to do that, I think you could go through and make the affixes themselves a little bit more not as one dimensional, and then just like make sure that they were all well balanced and not like super parasitic against each other, right? Super annoying with each other, like Spiteful Necrotic was whenever they put both of those on the same week, right? I don't know. I like the idea, but also I think it's pretty. I think they're probably going to keep the formula roughly as it is. So at least I hope that they look for things like the Sanguine Goliaths and
it's about dungeon interactions, right? Which I mean,
yeah,
it's just it's interesting that every single season the new seasonal affix is presented, and we had seasonal affixes interact with affixes once, and it's never happened again.
Yeah, Cahooties with
it always ends up so bad.
Yeah. It's also funny. Grievous always does, right? Because Grievous is just like dungeon wide, so it's like Grievous Zolgamux is a different beast than every other week.
God.
Yeah, imagine bolstering Zolgamux.
No.
How do we feel about dungeon score as it's been implemented midway through this expansion as a in-game feature, including with the different tyrannical weeks and fortified weeks, right? Like score from both weeks and score affecting what you can valor upgrade. How has that implementation gone for you guys now that there's been a couple of seasons of it?
I think it's been a success. I want to say there's probably a couple complaints I'm blanking on right now. I think it's hard to reach the upgrade threshold probably for a lot of people early on. But other than that, I think it's fine. Like it provides us a way to get the rank 1 title. It provides you a better way of seeing your own score without having to get an extra add-on for it, obviously. The only thing I don't like personally at my level of play is the linear scaling of scores. So like you time a 16, you get 7 points up from your 15. 3 months later, you struggle and finally time a 30, and you also get 7 points. I mean, I don't think that feels great to anybody.
It's a small change, right? But like, I mean, that's the only one I actually think that like the implementation of dungeon score halfway through the expansion has been, at least in my mind, largely a success. Like you get, like they also added like conduits to it whenever you got 3K last season in addition, which was like not like the easiest thing to get, by the way. It's not like it wasn't that difficult, but I think only like 10% of the Mythic Plus population ended up hitting 3K score. But in addition to that, they also have like the 0.1% titles and things like that. I think that and it also helps you filter in a different way through LFG outside of just gear score, which I think is also nice.
I will say I liked the brief period of time where account-wide Keystone Master let me Valor upgrade on my alts, and now I don't have that, and I have to get the IO on my alts, and I do not like having to get IO on the alts for the Valor upgrades because you have to do all 8 dungeons on both Tyrannical and Fortified, or obviously like you can miss a couple if you're doing higher than 15s, but I feel like
KSM has been turbo free the past 2 seasons, though.
Yes, but it's been free if you do 16 total keystones
16
of one of
times
each
20
dungeon,
minutes,
right? Like hunting down Upper Karazhan, Lower Karazhan, every single specific dungeon on the alts is not something that I enjoyed. Like I have an alt that has 30 total dungeons done this season, but like happens to not include a workshop, so that character can't Valor upgrade, right? And yes, it's not that hard for me to hunt it down. Like originally I was missing like 3 dungeons coming into this week, and now I'm missing just 1, and I'll get it at some point this week. But like, I liked it before when getting the Valor points, getting the score on my main, getting the item to upgrade. I feel like those were enough hoops to jump through for me to be able to Valor upgrade my piece, and adding the whole score hunting thing on the alts is not something that I have liked.
I do think it's important to do it on your main, though.
Yes,
like,
I agree.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So like, I think that you shouldn't. I thought that it was ridiculous that players in expansions pass would only be doing freehold for their weeklies for the whole expansion. That seemed a bit too egregious for my liking, and I think that like having to score hunt in some meaningful capacity, at least on a main,
Yeah.
is a nice thing because it forces you to get out of your comfort zone and like actually learn the dungeons and do more dungeons. Because I think that dungeon content in Mythic Plus is fun. Sometimes people need a little bit of a push, and this isn't something that like you're being like, oh, all right, we have to do like crazy hard content. It's like this is a gentle push in my mind.
Yeah, I think I'm totally fine with it on mains, to be clear.
Oh yeah, me too.
And that was what you had to do when you needed KSM on your, like, account-wide KSM, right? It was like you had to get it on your main, but then you didn't have to on your alts. That is all I'm asking for.
Yeah, I think what we're saying is just like, why is that gate there for the alts? I can't think of a downside if we remove the gate.
Yeah, sure. Seems reasonable.
Yeah.
Another thing before we go on and we can actually hit the Dinar deterministic loot thing pretty fast. I actually think that Tyrant and Fort feel a lot better because of the score system. Initially we were skeptical of how it was going to feel with like Tyrant being forced to do both Tyrant and Fortify, but I think that they've made a lot of the tyrannical affixes just in general a lot less punishing, like the affix combos, so it feels a little bit better. I have noticed this patch though, that Tyrant really hard. I love it.
Yeah, Tyrant is definitely still the worst level 2 affix by quite a bit compared to Fortified. It's just they have put it next to a bunch of easy affixes, and there's like no good Fortified weeks, right?
It also kind of sucks having the alt score system. Like whenever it's like so like you have a main Fortified key, and if you upgrade that you get 7 points, but if your alt score is on a Tyrant, you only get like 2 points or whatever, 3 points.
Yeah, 2 or 3. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the problem with linear scaling. I think if it wasn't linear, that would feel better.
Yeah, I guess that's probably true.
But I do think the Tyrannical and Fortified are closer than ever. It just requires them to constantly tune Tyrannical. Like every single season, they have to nerf it twice or something, because it scales so much harder than Fortified with the giant boss health and giant boss damage abilities.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to tip of the week. My tip of the week is in Lower Karazhan, there is a shrouded enemy if you turn left when you enter the Ghostly Philanthropist area rather than turning right. And I believe that is a very good thing to grab. That will be a buff that will last you for the rest of the dungeon. Those enemies are the easiest in the dungeon now since they don't do throw coin, since Pennies from Heaven was nerfed. So going over, picking up an extra shrouded buff there, that's an extra shrouded buff for Opera that otherwise you wouldn't be able to get. And it will last you through the rest of the dungeon. So that is my advice for any Lower Karazhan person, is to start adding that to your route.
Hot tip for Gambit: go right immediately. There's a pack with double Infiltrator in it. Banger pull, by the way.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That is a. If you haven't been paying attention to TGP, basically all teams are doing that pull now, where they go to the right side, and sometimes they'll pull the giant, sometimes they won't, depending on the level. But that pack with the double Infiltrator, you should be routing around that thing. That is a sick stack in that dungeon, and you'll end up with like 15 or 16 stacks in that key. It's really good.
All right, Trell, what is your tip of the week?
Mine's also about Lower Kara. We talk about Lower Kara a lot because that's a pretty hard dungeon. But the horse packs around the Atumen area are very, very scary for tank players. As you might have seen in TGP, every single tank player on every team died to the horses at some point or perked to them. And the reason for that is not only do they melee super hard, but they also have this charge mechanic plus some kicks that you have to assign. So the charge mechanic is what I'm talking about. So the very first time you see one of the horses charge, you should have an AoE stun for it in the group. If you don't have one as a tank, try to like ask your DPS to do it while you're walking down the stairs. Like, hey, stun as soon as you see a charge go off or try to go off. And then that'll sync up at least 2 or 3 of the horses, so you can just dodge them all at once instead of having to dodge one every other second while tanking and trying to call interrupts.
What Corey's actually been doing on his lock is he would go like Infernal into Blasphemy Stun into Shadow Fury every single time he sees charge. And so sometimes whenever you're pulling 4 horses, that would sync up basically all of the charge casts for the rest of the fight, and then our tank is able to move out of them and not get hit by them. Because that's what normally ends up killing tanks, at least in my experience, is if you get hit by like 2 of those charges, you're probably perking and dying.
If you get hit by 1 charge in a high 4K, you're dead, actually.
Yeah.
Those are hard pulls. But yeah, the chain CCs from the Warlock or like a Windwalker or something is perfect.
Yep. They can't be displaced. The charge can't be displaced, though.
Yeah, true. Just stuns.
Yeah, you can binding them, right? And then trigger the binding. And then if they charge, will they still damage the people in the purple?
I think so.
Okay, so don't do that then. Well, maybe still do that, because then they won't at least move far away, but probably not worth
It's good to keep them stacked. Yeah. It's nice in some way to keep them stacked, but it's not nice.
You still got to dodge the purple line.
Yeah.
All right, Tettles, what are we looking at in your clip this week?
Okay. Iron Docks. So you're probably going to see this during TGP, if Iron Docks is actually a dungeon that is selected for TGP. Unsure at this point still. The foot soldiers, really, really scary mobs. However, there is a spot, and you can actually use the spot that I'm jumping into, or alternatively, you can just stand against that back wall. And if you're standing there and then your group pulls these foot soldiers past this cart, then the foot soldiers will target you, since you're one of the only players at ranged, and try to bleed you with their dash. However, they won't have path to you, and so they will just not even cast it at all. However, this also requires all players to be within at least 10 yards of the foot soldiers, otherwise the charge will go onto them. The upside of this spot is that you can drop ground effects here. And so, like, the downside of standing back against the wall is that you actually can't place ground effects. So if you're something like a warlock, you couldn't drop Rain of Fire. If you're playing something like a fire mage, you couldn't drop a flame strike. Obviously, for me as a moonkin, I could stand against the wall or hop in that spot. It doesn't really matter. Or like a healer, just jumping in that spot is actually really good tech, just for foot soldier pulls in particular.
Yeah, foot soldiers giga nasty bleeds, so removing those from the equation, absolutely worthwhile.
Yeah, that's post nerf too. When we were practicing for TGP with those things, they were insane. Like, you couldn't pull more than 2 foot soldiers, period.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the deterministic loot system that we've seen in Season 4 and how it's gone. So we're talking about, I guess, the Dinar system, which, as of this week, anybody who's been killing every boss every week now has their 3rd Dinar. They can buy whichever items they want, but it's weird because, right, the Dinars were like 30, 15, 5 boss kills and then done, whereas the mythic upgrade thing or the heroic upgrade thing are just on this fixed 20 kills for an upgrade token thing. So obviously, like, if you were on the bench for any amount of bosses, right, if you're anything other than like a main tank or a DPS player that's in for every pull, you don't have all of your mythic upgrades yet. You maybe have your 2nd, or maybe you don't even have your 2nd yet. And it does create a bit of an interesting tension overall. How have you guys been feeling about Dinars? How has gearing up on live been for both of you? What's your experience been like?
Well, I haven't played a ton. I was kind of like intentionally sat or self-sat on a lot of bosses, so I'm coming up on my 2nd Dinar next week.
Okay.
But I think if I were to play most of the bosses like I normally would, it would have been pretty solid in my opinion. Like, I would have gotten my 2 BIS items pretty quick in the season and been happy about that.
So I've been in on everything on my main. So I've gotten all of my I've got all the tokens and dinars and stuff like that. Finished off all the stuff that I needed to. My alt, been playing a warlock a lot lately. Doesn't have anything, and so it has absolutely nothing because it has a step foot in raid. So I'm trying to figure out what I want to do, and it may involve me bringing that character to main raid for a couple of bosses and doing LFR every single week to get the faded progress on the quest, so at least I can have the Dinar, and at least at some point I'll be able to get an Antumbra maybe before the season's over. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't like that. I refuse to go to LFR on my DK.
Well, Drydas, you have like 4 characters, don't you?
Yeah, I've been playing a little DK, a little monk, a little hunter.
And so you're bringing those to raid in some variable fashion, yeah?
Yeah, I've been doing some shenanigans, the swapping things in for different fights and tricking my guild into carrying some questionable characters on certain encounters.
That maybe what happens to me, yeah?
Yeah,
maybe.
I mean, it's not really something that everybody in your raid could be. I mean, I guess I haven't brought too much rats to too many fights or anything like that, but I made them carry my hunter through like Kel'Thuzad or something, and Stone Legion Generals actually last week, which the character's not that bad, but it wasn't great. So I don't know. Yeah, I've gotten my Dinar on my Death Knight and 1 mythic upgrade token, so I got my mythic gavel on that thing. Still waiting on the 2nd. Like, next week, if I do bosses on it, I'll get my 2nd and 3rd Dinars. And if I do a lot of bosses on it, I'll get another mythic upgrade token. But there's not even really anything I want on that character, because like I'm kind of not even tanking anymore. Jason has decided he wants to play a tank this season, and so I'm happy to just sit back and DPS raid. And so I've been playing like Unholy and Survival and for some fights. So
I don't know.
Did that guy just say Unholy?
Yeah, you're speaking to the rank 2 Unholy DK on Guardian of the First Ones, so, you know. Or at
Oh
least
yeah, dude.
you were at the time. Haters will say most of the rest of the guild got rank 1s, and my rank 2 is pretty embarrassing in that context because it's a very fast kill, but that's just haters. Don't listen to them.
Did you guys
And
do the same
also-
thing we did, where you held CDs for the motes to come out, and then they didn't come out for like 45 seconds?
Yeah. Yeah, we did do that. Haters will say I pressed Apocalypse with 1 Festering Wound active as well. Again, slander. Do not investigate the log.
Would the haters also say that most DPS Death Knights are not playing Unholy this patch?
Well, look, if I played Frost, I would be playing 2-handed Frost. That's even a curseder because I don't have one-handers on that thing. I'm trying to get some, but until I do, Unholy is the the move.
I'm following.
Yeah.
I think that overall, like, the Dinar system is nice and it's like a step in the right direction. I just don't feel like it's like a long-term solution to all the problems. In addition to that, okay, so for mains, it's like mostly fine. But I think that if you're ever trying to play a second character, it just feels like a system that, and in addition to like if you're a DPS, it's like you're going to be perpetually behind because you end up like sitting on bosses. It's weird that it only comes from raid. Also, is something that
Yeah.
I guess it's to get raid gear, but
Yeah.
okay, I think you should at least be able to get like maybe like 70% of the Dinar or like 70% of like the mythic upgrade tokens through like if you only do like 3 bosses or whatever. Like it's just weird that you have to do all of the bosses and you're always in.
So for me, I think the Dinars work fine because like at least the part about having to like the fact that you could get it from LFR, normal or heroic, is enough for me to make me think the Dinar part, at least needing to do every boss for that, is fine. The mythic upgrade tokens, I hugely agree. You should be getting extra from your first few mythic kills per week to make it so that it's like not as bad to be benched for a few bosses. I will say I don't think this system would be particularly good to have live at the start of a fresh tier.
Agreed.
I feel like this is the kind of system that in an actual real tier should probably be like 6 weeks into the tier that it comes out, something like that. Maybe again like some way where you could start collecting these pieces, but you can't use them until some amount of time into the tier. Because I do think like, man, if we were able to get literally mythic faded gavel or mythic gavels, right, all that stuff like 3 weeks into actual Sepulcher, I feel like that would be really weird. I feel like it's like Creation Catalyst level power, and maybe Creation Catalyst came out a couple weeks later than it was supposed to, but maybe both of these systems should have come out like 2 weeks before the Creation Catalyst did in a future tier.
But in addition to that, like think about how it impacts you if you're extending, or and 2, it doesn't change anything for alts, and it still doesn't really prevent you from being unlucky with your gearing, right? There's like
Yeah, I mean it's nice for like if your alt does a heroic run each week, like you can get a lot of good stuff on an alt just from doing one run of heroic each week. Now
you need 20 kills to make a piece good if you don't natural it.
Yeah, but that's like if you literally are just like if you do a weekly heroic on your alt, like that character gets very good gear now for like deterministically, like yeah, it's heroic, not mythic, but like you can get a 298 old warrior soul or whatever, and whatever trinket you need, whatever weapon you need, like
yeah.
I think that the fact that like obviously the catch there is like doing a heroic on your alt, which kind of feels weird given that the loot from most bosses is worse than M+ loot, so you're literally just there collecting your quest credit and your upgrade token. So yeah, I'm torn.
It's like heroic. I did a heroic heroic run on my DK last week, and I soloed every boss and Nathria on it. But it was like we were just killing the bosses for the token, just like you said. The loot just hardly mattered at all. Nobody was trading loot. It was just like go through a raid real quick, spend an hour, and then get your 10 out of 10 boss kills.
Yeah, I don't know. The upgrade token is definitely the issue, especially for alts. Like, what are you supposed to do about characters that aren't going into mythic raid too? Should those characters not have mythic gear?
I don't know. Yeah, I mean,
is that really the answer? Because I mean,
that was the answer before, right?
Well, they've been getting it out of the vault lately.
True, yeah, and you still can. I mean, I guess this season in particular, it's like 311s are possible in every slot, but that is a relic of the fact that there's 3 raids in the rotation, right? And so there's like 3 times as many slots that have 311s, and so 304s feel a lot worse this season than they would in a regular season. But Yeah. Also, the way that the upgrade tokens work, and you don't actually have to be killing the end bosses to upgrade pieces to 311.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I think in general, like, I think this season in particular, this was a really good system to add, and I think you wouldn't need to change much for me to be in favor of adding it a couple weeks into a regular season, even a month or so in. But yeah, I will say it's definitely, yeah. There's definitely some weird tensions about it. Like, I've done more heroic runs than I'd want to this season, and they've been less fun than I would have hoped. And also like, people like wanting to be in on bosses just for the credit, but like not actually wanting
I don't need anything.
to. Yeah, it's like you're literally just there for the upgrade token. 1/20th of your upgrade token is like
Yeah, exactly. I think, like you said, it comes back to the fact that it's a problem of like playing a different character in Mythic Plus than in Raid, if that's your issue, which I think that's what we're all talking about. And that problem stems from the fact that the best loot still comes from Raid for Mythic Plus. So I think if they did anything, they could fix getting your best loot from Mythic Plus somehow, like a lot of people have been talking about, and then that would solve this plus a lot of other issues too.
It's not just that too, but it's also about playing an alt character just in general, or even an alt spec. So say you were tanking, let's just use Paladin as an example. Like what you're trying to get as a holy paladin is vastly different than what you're trying to get as like a prop paladin, right? Or a red.
Yeah, that's true.
Like you were trying to get very different things for those three classes. Like it is not even remotely the same. Obviously, it's similar for druid. Like if you're playing guardian druid versus like say you're doing guardian druid for some bosses, and then you play balanced druid for some bosses, you were looking for very, very different gear.
That's a good point. Like I even like made a note to myself. I was like, I got to choose whether I want Windwalker gear or Brewmaster gear this tier, which kind of sucks to have to choose. And so I chose Brew because that's what I'll end up doing late in the season, probably just pushing for the rank 1 title or whatever. But yeah, it sucks to have to make that choice.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's there's a couple of issues with the system. I think it's good. I think it's good intro. I think that it can be definitely expanded upon and to be a little bit better.
Yeah, I'm looking forward. Like, I do hope it's something that they iterate on and not something they just hope they toss into the garbage, because I do think it did do more good than bad. But yeah, I also agree. Some further, try some new stuff on it next time it comes around. Okay, we got a couple Q&A questions to get to, but first, we get to thank our supporters over on the Patreon. But first, also a shout out to all of the people. So we got some people in our Titanforge Discord that have gotten very high IO recently that
True.
Like to shout out some of those folks. Tettles, you want to name some names of some of the high IO Titanforge podcast Discord denizens?
One Scyther and one Avocado. I'm pretty sure both of those people are over 3K IO right now.
Yeah, so
I think Scyther last week was like top 40 in the world.
Congrats to those of you that are up there, and come hang out in the Discord to get to bask in the glow of some high IO gamers that are in there.
They're just adding to the collection of tanks that we have in that Discord that hang out regularly. We have like 7 or 8 tank players that are very, very high end players just hanging out in that Discord. So if you ever have any questions about tanks, hop on in. Yeah.
Crassus is also very high and ends up talking there frequently as well. That guy's, is he 3,200 yet? He's very, very good.
All right, so some of the supporters over on the Patreon are Paul, Titanforge podcast, more like Tanks Are Forged Here podcast. You like how that kind of worked out with the little shout-outs before?
Yeah, nice segue.
Yeah, T.Y. Riley. Who's ready to spell reflect the big slimes in Gunker area and get wrecked by some weeks because the hard mode bot is in the wrong spot? Again, do not be playing there when the hard mode bots are spawned. That is the most banned thing I've ever heard. Do not play where the hard mode robots are spawning under any circumstances.
I have a question. Somebody told me this. You may be able to dispute this. Does the hard mode bot always go north, or like it goes like up and then it like cycles back down after it goes to Gobamac? Somebody told me that, and I go,
"Is that true?
Is that true?" Somebody told me that this week, and I don't even know if that's true or not.
I don't know.
I mean, it doesn't matter that much. You just go wherever it's not, and then it'll move again. It's not a huge deal, but that could be interesting to know.
Never Nude, Jaw, Drownus' Dino Pillow, Chromed, Trekkie, Chewy. To prepare gearing for Dragonflight, it's recommended to have 6 to 7 alts with a profession, or else you have to talk to people. You don't have to talk. There's the crafting order system on the auction house that looks like may make talking to people not important, but having alter professions I think will probably be good as well if you're trying to save gold. ZivXX, Salty Seni, Necris, Sinmora, Tankdill, Nevuk, Eevee Survival Main, No Trick, I Forgot I Was Sub-Tier, Dymat, Lufer, Rework Mistweaver. Pally B-Res requires the Pally to sack themselves but still use a B-Res charge. I think it requires 3 holy power, which is quite the steep cost.
Oh,
Nick,
it doesn't have
such
a cast time
shame
too.
for holy paladins.
Yeah. Nyx, DH tree looking spicy, 2-minute meta haste build, big momentum build, a CC god build. Oh my. Yeah, the Vengeance tree has just come out today as well. Some interesting stuff that's on there. We didn't talk about that.
Oh, I haven't looked at it yet.
Yeah.
People in my guild seemed pretty positive on the Vengeance tree.
So-
They sound...
Yeah, there's this like left side of the tree that's all about frailty buffs or frailty debuffs, which currently Spirit Bomb applies frailty. And if you do all the stuff on the left tree, you can make it do, you heal off of the targets, they do less damage to you, you do more damage to them, and you can get multiple stacks of frailty overlap as a thing on there as well. So
Oh, that's pretty cool.
it is kind of, it does seem cool, but on the other hand, there's definitely like parts of the current kit that you will be missing out on if you're whichever side of the tree you're picking, you are going to be missing some buttons you currently have. So I'm not sure.
It's apparently I think the only complaint I heard is like the position of Spirit Bomb was a little bit weird. Maybe I didn't take a
it's
lot of time
far
to look at it.
left, far bottom left, pretty much. Not bottom, but like right above the second gate. So it is, you have to, there's like 6 required talents to get to it basically that you can't get to it without.
Yeah, I think that was the only criticism I even heard about it, because the rest of the stuff with that tree, it sounded like it was all very positive. But a lot of Vengeance Demon Hunters, Spirit Bomb enthusiasts, so they would like that in a different spot, is what it sounded like.
Yeah. I mean, it is pretty costly to go. Like, you're going to be giving up on stuff like Elysian Decree, probably. I haven't actually looked at what the points look like, but the stuff on the right hand side of the tree is probably pretty mutually exclusive with the Spirit Bomb stuff.
It's all good. You don't need Elysian Decree if they add what Tettles suggested last week, where it's a 3-point threat node right in the middle.
That was a good draw.
Gallic, Brusive, Dratnos Abyss, Pogger's Power Word Update, Feel Strong Man, Clap, We Are Saved, Feels Okay Man, M-Sanity, Xena, Rogue Now Good Enough for Prog, Still Bad Enough to be Sat for SLG, Bless Up, Red Color, YouTube.com/Workbringer, Alphabet Soup, Druid Friends of Evolved Gaming, Number One Simsky for Trelsky. Lurka wants to remind the world that it's not my fault. That's supposed to be an Australian accent, but I went Scottish there.
Hold on.
How
All I heard was like a
Scottish.
dwarven accent there.
That was not Australian.
how do Australians sound? Quirky. It's not my fault. That also
there
went
we go.
Scottish. I don't know.
I don't know. It's better than the original.
Milk. Ziffe, Pone, Windwalker Monks deal with Nurse by rolling with the punches. Due to Sims with 4-piece, Skelly will be going back to Elemental from Enhance. Please finish casting Power Word Update, the Marsh Hare, and please keep Kyrian Arcane in Dragonflight. A lot of these requests have been fulfilled so far, so it seems good.
Oh yeah, isn't Arcane keeping their Touch of the Magi?
Yeah, I think they are.
Well, there you go.
All right, Q&A time. First question comes from Myth Def, who says, yes, my guild is strongly considering stopping Faded raids in a few weeks in favor of mount farms and sales. Do we have any suggestions for people that want to continue Faded Mythic week to week without leaving their current group? Well, my guess is in a couple weeks every raid is going to be Faded. I don't know exactly when, but they said at some point in the season all the raids will be Faded every week. And I think it's either going to be the next time Castle Nathri would come around, or like 3 weeks after that, the next time Castle Nathri would roll around.
When was what was the date that was leaked as the pre-patch date? It was like October
25th or something?
Yeah, pulling it up 1 second. October 25th. Yeah. So I feel like it would have to be like the next time Nathra comes around, because then they wouldn't do it 3 weeks after that, right? Because that doesn't make sense. Or maybe it would be in the pre-patch?
Or it could be a non-Nathria week, but then it would be weird because each of the raids would have been faded a different amount of weeks, but that wouldn't necessarily be the end of the world, so I don't know. Yeah, in general, advice for people that are kind of unhappy with what their guild's doing in general, of like, either doing more or less faded than you want, either doing more or less like mount farms or sales than you want.
Doing no faded raids.
Yeah, doing no faded is when you want to do faded. Doing faded when you'd rather do nothing. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I would say like ultimately you got to make a decision about like, are you happy with the guild in general? Because I would say a lot of guilds are kind of pulled in a lot of different directions right now. And if you like the guild in general, if you like being there in progress, I would try and see if there's a way that you could like, whatever your top priority is, if it's like, hey, I really want this specific trinket, like, can we just do Fate Scribe whenever it's up or whatever, or something like that? See if you can kind of do a bargain of some kind with them, or see if see what the consensus is among the raiders, and see if there's like enough people. See if maybe if your guild's not doing faded and another guild on your server is also not doing faded, maybe you guys could combine and do like a faded mythic run together or something like that. But I'd say in general, try, as somebody who's on the organizing side of this, it's pretty there's a lot of it's hard to like keep, especially this season, it's hard to have everybody on the same page and like getting what they want out of these raids. So
especially with so much going on in the game right now, period. Like there's beta just coming out, there's Wrath of the Lich King Classic coming out, and this is also like a weird season in retail WoW, so it's like a lot of people aren't going to want to play like they usually do. They don't care about gear maybe this season. There's a lot of different camps.
Normally, my normal opinion, whenever you're like you have strong desires that go against the grain of your guild, is normally to leave your guild and find a new guild. However, this time we are in a like Charles just stated, we are in a weird season, and in addition to that, the new expansion's coming out kind of soonish as well. I don't feel, and like with the current state of the season, I don't know if I would necessarily be looking to leave build right here. If I were you, like, I would definitely just like suck it up if they start to do sales, but I would tell them that like, oh man, these are, like Dratno said, these are the things that I'm looking for. I'm looking for like this Fate Scribe trinket or whatever, and try to see if people will instead like, hopefully at least try to get you the gear that you're looking for.
Yeah, it's tough. Like if you just want to be doing faded each week because it's fun, and you're in a guild where 15 people don't want to be doing faded each week, that is going to be a tension. But like unlike the usual things where it's like, oh, I want something different than my guild, I think that you may still be perfectly happy with them in progression next expansion. So yeah, I would hesitate to leave the guild in that spot.
Well, it's just okay. So like I brought up earlier, the projected leak date of like the Dragonflight pre-patch is the 25th. Like we're a month and a half, maybe a little bit more than a month and a half away of October. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the leaked one, which again we don't know if that's accurate or final or anything, but yeah. But
say it is, like we're a month and a half away. I would not be guild searching a month and a half away for pre-patch. That sounds like a tough time.
All right, next question comes from Riley in Discord, who says, would you want faded raids back as is? I assume in some future end of expansion thing or maybe mid-expansion thing. Or do you like the boss rush idea that someone had the other day, where we would have had 3 bosses from each raid and as such only had the most popular ones and not the more boring ones? So just like instead of this faded thing, it was just like there's a season 4 raid instance and it's like, Sludgefist Sire, Rygalon, Halandris, Jailer, Anduin, Painsmith or whatever, and just like literally just like a few specific bosses that you're hopping between.
Fun, actually.
But the most popular ones are the hardest ones.
Well, at least among us, yeah. Maybe there are ones earlier, like Terragru. I feel like Terragru would be a great start of a boss rush boss. I don't know. You could even
anything to get out of pulling Fate Scribe.
Stone Legion Generals.
Let's see, Stone Legion Generals. What are the other horrible bosses?
Prototype Pantheon.
Ner'zhul. Remnant.
Ner'zhul, yeah. Yep, skip
that. That guy sucked this week, by the way.
Yeah, soaks during the Nox, that was tough.
Yeah, I think the idea of a boss rush is a cool thing to do instead of faded in future seasons. Yeah, I think also just like I like the faded too. I would like faded or boss rushes that would include even older expansion bosses too. I miss Gul'dan. I miss all of Nighthold. I'd love to have those in a season like this in either of those ways.
That's a good point. That would have been cool to bring back like a couple bosses from a really, really old raid.
Oh my god. Liked. If they brought back Nighthold, I could get Whispers in the Dark back. Oh my god, that would have been too lit.
I could have got Draft of Soul or Convergence of Fates. Oh, Convergence of Fates. Bis for everybody again.
Oh my god, all of the trinkets from Nighthold were so sick. There's also the
Yeah.
Frond.
Yep.
Oh my gosh, that, and then the chromatic anomaly trinket. Oh my god, that raid had
Oh,
the
yeah,
best
there
trinkets
was some
ever.
Really
Holy
good stuff.
Wait a second.
It's a good raid. It's a good
That was
tier.
a good raid. That was a good raid. I think it would be cool if they brought back like a legacy raid like that at some point. Would I like to see it as Fated, kind of how it is now? I think I prefer Fated over Boss Rush. I think I prefer like the full length raid over just like a Boss Rush.
Let me just say, like, I am down for further experiments or tweaks to either system. Like, any ideas they've got for a future season 4 type thing, if they want to try something new and they think it might be cool, I'm here for a test run. So, like, we haven't seen a Boss Rush, what that would be like yet. I would be down to see a test run of it. That would be cool.
Dude, they made the dungeon sick. But initially, we were all skeptical of the dungeons in season 4 being awful. They ended up being really good. So.
Yeah, I mean, like, it really makes me excited about the just general thing, because it kind of seems like any dungeons will be fun for a season. Even the ones that are the most beans are still fun for a season. So, yeah.
True that.
All right. That is it for our questions, and therefore that is it for our podcast. We will be back next week to discuss the results from the Great Push and
maybe we'll
some
have
other
a
topic.
guest.
Maybe we'll have a guest. Maybe we won't. You never know. We'll keep you guessing. But yeah, that's it for us this week. Later, gamers.
Goodbye.
Later.